The night I found the letter, I was supposed to be taking out the trash. I know, it sounds so ordinary, so completely unremarkable. But that's how 20 years of lies ended. Not with a dramatic confrontation. Not with a phone call from a stranger. Not with anything you'd see in a movie. It ended with me standing in our garage in my bathrobe at 11 o'clock at night, holding a dusty shoebox I'd pulled off the top shelf by accident. My name is Karen. I'm 48 years old. And what I'm about to tell you is something I have never said out loud to another person. If you've ever felt like you were living in a life that wasn't entirely yours, stay with me. Let me know in the comments if any of this sounds familiar, because I don't think I'm alone in this. David and I met in 1998 at a company picnic in Columbus, Ohio. He was the kind of man who remembered your coffee order on the second date. Thoughtful, steady, safe. I had come from a chaotic family. My mother struggled with depression, my father worked 3 jobs, and David felt like an anchor. We got married in 2001. Bought a house in a suburb outside of Cleveland. Had 2 kids, Emma and Tyler. David worked in logistics. I worked part-time as a dental hygienist until Emma was born, and then I stayed home. For 17 years, I stayed home. And honestly, for most of those years, I thought we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were fine. There's a difference, isn't there? Happy and fine. I didn't ask myself which one we were. I just kept going. Made the school lunches. Went to the parent-teacher conferences. Sat next to David at church on Sunday mornings. Fine. But somewhere around year 12, I noticed something shift in him. He got quieter. Not in a cruel way, David was never cruel, but in a way that felt like he was carrying something heavy that he'd decided I didn't need to know about. I asked him about it once. He said he was stressed about work. I believed him. I always believed him. Have you ever sensed that someone you love is keeping something from you, but you're too afraid to push? Because some part of you knows that if you pull that thread, everything unravels? By the time our kids were in high school, David and I had settled into what I can only describe as a polite arrangement. We were roommates who shared a mortgage and 20 years of photographs on the wall. We didn't fight. We didn't really laugh anymore either. I had started to grieve the marriage while I was still in it. That's a particular kind of loneliness that I think a lot of women my age understand. You look at the man across the dinner table and you think, I don't know who you are anymore. And worse, I don't know who I became, trying to love you. I had given up my career. I had given up friendships, one by one, the way it happens when you're busy. And then suddenly it's been 4 years since you called someone who used to be your best friend. I had given up the version of myself that existed before I was David's wife. And the cruelest part? I had started to wonder if that was my fault. If I had become too small, too ordinary, too much of a background character in my own story. I was 47 years old and I felt invisible. That's when I found the shoebox. But that wasn't the worst part. What was inside it? That's what broke something open in me that I'm still learning to live with. Inside the shoebox was a letter. Handwritten. Dated 2003, 2 years after we got married. It was from David. To a woman named Patricia. I want to be careful here because the truth is more complicated than I expected. And complicated truths deserve to be told carefully. The letter wasn't what I thought it was. It wasn't a love letter. It was a goodbye letter. David was ending something. Something that had started before we met. Something he had never fully closed the door on. In the letter, he told Patricia that he had made his choice. That he was committed to his marriage. That he was sorry. He had chosen me. 20 years ago, he had chosen me. And he had never told me. Not that she existed. Not that there had been a choice to make. Not that the steady, reliable man I had married had once stood at a crossroads and picked a direction, and then carried the weight of that road not taken for 2 solid decades. I sat on the cold concrete floor of that garage for a very long time. I didn't know whether to cry because he had lied, or cry because he had stayed. I didn't know whether I was mourning a betrayal or witnessing a sacrifice. What I knew was this. The distance I had felt for years, that quiet, unexplained wall between us, had a name now. He hadn't drifted away from me. He had been grieving something he thought he didn't deserve to grieve. And instead of letting me in, he had just gotten quieter. Year by year. until he was practically a ghost sitting at his own dinner table. Would you have confronted him? Or would you have sat with it first, the way I did? I did confront him. 3 days later, when the kids were out and the house was quiet, I put the letter on the kitchen table between us. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. And then he did something I hadn't seen him do since our wedding day. He cried. He told me everything. Patricia had been his college girlfriend, his first real love. She had moved across the country. He had convinced himself it was over, and then it wasn't, and then he met me, and then he chose me, and then he was ashamed of the fact that there had been a choice at all. He thought if he told me I would leave. So he buried it. For 20 years, he buried it. I won't pretend that conversation fixed everything. Didn't. There were months of hard talks after that. We saw a counselor. There were nights I slept in the guest room because I couldn't breathe in the same space as the weight of all those silent years. But here is what I want you to hear, the thing I have learned on the other side of this. Secrets don't just damage the person who keeps them. They hollow out the people who live beside them. I had spent a decade feeling like I was disappearing, and I blamed myself for it. I thought I had become less. The truth was, I had been slowly suffocated by someone else's silence. We are still together, David and I. Not because it was easy, and not because I simply forgave and forgot. We are together because we finally, after 20 years, started telling each other the truth. I am not the same woman who found that shoebox. I went back to work. I called the friends I had let slip away. I started asking myself every single morning what I actually want, not just what I can tolerate. At 48 years old, I am finally learning to live like I matter. And if you are somewhere in the middle of a life that feels like it belongs to someone else, I want you to know, it is not too late. It is never too late to demand the truth. From the people you love. From yourself. If this story touched something you recognize, something you've been carrying, or something you're afraid to look at, I hope you'll share it in the comments. You don't have to share everything. Even just, I understand this. That matters. And if you believe the way I'm learning to believe that it's never too late for honesty, for healing, for a second chapter, consider subscribing. There are more stories here. Real ones. Human ones. Stories about the things we carry, and what happens when we finally put them down.